Hi, welcome to Story Mode, the place where you'll find the stories you've been waiting for. Today, we're continuing the story, How I Became the Greatest Mage Ever. Chapter 2, Dual Elements. A purple arc of lightning suddenly flashed across the darkness. A tiny cluster of purple stardust appeared in the void. Bryan froze. Purple. Lightning. Lightning element! At that exact moment, the entire school erupted in chaos. A lightning element appeared. Someone awakened lightning! It's in classroom 7! Students rushed to look. Lightning was the rarest and most powerful beginner element. Out of 1,500 students, only one might awaken it. Bryan opened his eyes happily. See, y'all were all doubting me. Who looks like a fool now? Ha 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 ha! Then he noticed something strange. Everyone was looking somewhere else, at the student in the next class. What the hell? I awakened lightning too! Come back! Just as Bryan was about to speak, the awakening stone suddenly lit up again. Power surged through his body once more. Inside his spiritual world, another force appeared. A burning red meteor streaked across the darkness. Red stardust formed beside the purple one. Fire. Bryan's mind exploded. Lightning. Fire. 2 elements. Did I awaken 2 elements? In beginner magic, students normally awaken only 1 element. The probability of awakening 2 elements was almost non-existent. Bryan trembled with excitement. This meant he would cultivate 2 magic systems simultaneously. It was like everyone else having 1 account in a game, while he had 2. And both belonged to the same character. Lightning. Fire. 2 of the most powerful offensive elements. Bryan nearly laughed out loud. Let's see who is laughing now. After the chaos surrounding the lightning element student calmed down, the class finally noticed Bryan's awakening stone. It's fire element! Another fire element? Classroom 8 has 2 fire element mages. Mr. Martin stared in disbelief. The student he thought might fail had awakened fire element with outstanding talent. Very good, very good. Mr. Martin smiled widely. Bryan initially thought someone had witnessed his lightning elemental awakening. However, when he looked around, he was surprised to find that no one had noticed it at all. He guessed that the appearance of the lightning mage from classroom 7 had been too shocking. Or perhaps his awakened lightning elemental power had simply been too weak. The initial strength of an awakened element does have an impact, but it is not decisive. Even if the initial awakened element is weak, it can gradually be improved through diligent training. Bryan was still overjoyed. However, he didn't get carried away. Most teenagers would probably have wanted to immediately display their newly awakened lightning element and fire element, completely overwhelming and showing off. But Bryan didn't do that. Bryan knows that some people in the Luna family harbor deep hostility toward him. If he revealed his innate dual elemental abilities, he would either be forced to obey or be eliminated. Bryan glanced back at Caleb and Jack. Sure enough, both of their faces were twitching. What kind of luck did this kid have? Not only did he successfully awaken, but he also awakened the fire element. Caleb maintained a righteous expression, but inwardly he was cursing. Holy crap! How is this possible? Fire element! Jack, the lackey, was completely dumbfounded. Jack was furious. Bryan turned around with a carefree smile on his face. Bathed in sunlight, he seemed to walk as if a red carpet had been spread beneath his feet, while girls on both sides screamed in excitement. His smugness was beyond description. As he walked past Caleb, Bryan silently raised his middle finger. The entire gesture of contempt was executed flawlessly, almost like a casual greeting. Caleb felt as if he had been struck by a barrage of insults, his chest tightening with anger. Taking a deep breath, Caleb told himself to maintain his image. He absolutely had to maintain his image. He couldn't lower himself to the level of this little brat. After all, he was practically a member of the Luna family. This guy was merely the son of a servant. Not only did this piece of trash successfully awaken, but he even awakened the fire type, which has a huge advantage in the early stages. Even trash can have trash-level luck. And what's even more infuriating is that a rare lightning type appeared in the next class, completely overshadowing my inherited ice type. Damn it! On the surface, Caleb maintained the calm demeanor of a Prince Charming. But inside, he was already cursing endlessly. Bryan returned to his seat, noticing the completely different gazes his classmates were giving him. A fire elementalist, huh? Try not to mess with this guy. What do you mean, don't mess with him? We should build a good relationship with him. By the way, what's his name? Is it Bryan? The whispers reached Bryan's ears. He felt a surge of satisfaction and glanced at Caleb, who had clearly overheard the conversation as well. Sure enough, Caleb's lips were twitching. Bryan knew exactly what kind of person Caleb was. Always pretending to be noble and indifferent, but secretly boiling with anger. Just looking at his fake calm expression, Bryan knew Caleb was suffering inside. I only awakened the fire element, and you're already this angry? What will you do when you find out that your dad, me, Bryan Lambert, had also awakened lightning element? Wouldn't you faint in tears? Summer had passed. Fall had arrived. Leaves are slowly turning brown and falling from the trees. Fallen leaves swirled in the wind, drifting gently onto the school field. 2 months have passed since the awakening, and for Bryan, these 2 months pass in a blink of an eye. During those 2 months, Bryan had done only one thing. Every single day, he sat there under a tree and meditated. On the very first day of class, their homeroom teacher, Mr. Martin, taught all the students an important lesson: how to release magic. According to him, releasing magic required only 3 simple steps. First, meditation. Second, control. Third, release. Meditation, as the name suggests, meant focusing completely. When a person closes their eyes, their mind usually fills with endless thoughts and images. But if the mind becomes perfectly still, thinking of nothing at all, then the mind becomes a blank world. And for a mage who has awakened, within that blank world, stardust of their element will appear. For Bryan, whenever he closes his eyes and clears his mind completely, allowing it to become as empty as a dark universe, 2 kinds of stardust appear within that void: lightning and fire. The lightning stardust glows purple, like a tiny galaxy floating within the darkness of his mind. Beautiful, captivating, dazzling. Inside this lightning stardust exist 7 small star particles. They move randomly within the stardust, like 7 mischievous children running wildly in every direction. For any student that awaken their magic, simply being able to summon this stardust and observe the lively stars inside it means the meditation stage is complete. The first step of magic training is surprisingly simple. And for the past 2 months, this had been the only homework assigned to all the students. Every day after class, they would meditate until they were completely exhausted, and then fall asleep. Then, the next day, repeat the same routine over and over again. Bryan never slacked off. For 2 full months, including weekends, he followed this routine without fail. But many times, he couldn't help but wonder why the teachers had assigned such a simple task for such a long period of time. Maybe I should try controlling them. Bryan had already become quite skilled at entering meditation, so naturally, he wanted to move on to the second step: control. The second step of releasing magic was also quite straightforward. Once you enter meditation, you see the stardust, and inside it, the 7 lively star particles moving about freely. Control means using your mental power to command those star particles. You must calm them down and make them stop at specific positions, forming a star trail. Once the star trail is formed, magical energy flows through that path and enters the mage's body, transforming into real magic that can finally be released. Bryan attempted to communicate with the star particles. Using his mental power, he locked onto one particularly energetic star and tried to force it to stop. Whoosh! The star ignored him completely. It darted away instantly, like a frightened little girl running away from a creepy stranger. Damn, so arrogant. Fine, Let's try another one. Bryan targeted another lightning star. The second star fled even faster, like it had just encountered a dangerous criminal. Bryan tried several more stars, but the result was always the same. None of them listened. Some even ran away faster the moment they sensed that Bryan was trying to control them. When the stars continue spinning and flying randomly, magical energy cannot be transmitted. It's like electricity inside a wire. The power exists inside the stardust, but unless the stars can form a connected line, the energy cannot flow to the mage's body. Unfortunately, none of Bryan's lightning stars were willing to cooperate. If he ignored them, they behaved normally, but the moment he tried to control them, they ran away like they'd eaten 500 pounds of chewing gum and couldn't stop moving. What am I supposed to do? When will I ever learn Lightning Seal? Bryan felt completely frustrated. Lightning Seal was the basic lightning magic spell, and among all beginner spells, it was one of the most practical and powerful. Once mastered, it would grant incredible combat ability. Unfortunately, learning magic was not easy. Lightning element stars were extremely active. Getting them to stop wasn't something that could be accomplished in a day or two. Right now, I can't even control one star. Controlling 7 at the same time. Bryan sighed. The road ahead is really long. But learning magic, just like studying, was never something that could be achieved overnight. The weather gradually grew colder. Without anyone realizing it, winter had arrived. Achoo! Damn it! I should have awakened my fire element first. At least winter would be easier. Early that morning, Bryan cursed while practicing control on the rooftop. After another month of training, Bryan could now successfully control up to 4 stars. Controlling stars felt like performing an extremely difficult version of setting up dominoes. You had to place several dominoes perfectly at the same time, without letting a single one wobble. The moment one star lost control, everything collapsed, and you had to start all over again. First, you must lock onto a star and force it to remain still using pure willpower. Even if the star resists and causes intense pain in your head, you must endure it. Only through absolute focus can a violent lightning star be forced into obedience. After stabilizing one star, you must divide your mental energy and repeat the same process with another. But if you accidentally focus too much energy on the second star, the first star immediately escapes, and both stars fly away together, all previous effort wasted. Teachers had warned them before, star control is extremely difficult. Not only does it require precise manipulation, it also consumes enormous mental energy. Bryan could practice for at most 2 hours per day before suffering severe mental exhaustion, ringing ears, blurred vision, and a foggy mind. After that point, he could no longer meditate or control stars. In other words, practicing control drained mana incredibly fast. A full mental energy bar lasted only 2 hours. 4 stars already. Controlling 5 will be even harder. Bryan sighed. I wonder if I can control all 7 before the semester ends. Avery said he can only practice for 1 hour a week now. He collapses after 5 minutes. Bryan scratched his head. But I could practice for 2 hours from the beginning. Could it be because I awakened 2 elements? If controlling 1 star consumes the same amount of energy for everyone, then Bryan's mental energy pool must be twice as large. That meant he had a natural advantage. Combined with his daily hard work, his progress had already surpassed his classmates. Even Caleb, the top student in the class, had only managed to control 3 stars. Bryan had already reached 4, and he was close to reaching 5. 7 stars were required to form the star trail. At this rate, Bryan might succeed soon. Awakening dual elements clearly gave him more than just 2 magical abilities. It even gave him a longer training endurance. This was a perfect advantage. The life he'd been wanting was right ahead of him. Fame, power, and maybe even marrying a beautiful and wealthy woman. All of it suddenly felt within reach. Class starts 8 in the morning, and first period was demonology taught by Mr. Aoki, the homeroom teacher of Classroom 7. Hey Bryan, why are you late again? You're not as talented as most of your classmates. Your foundation is already weak, and yet you still don't take things seriously. Look at Steven in our class. He awakened lightning magic, he's intelligent, has a strong foundation, and his learning attitude is excellent. He can already control 4 lightning stars. And you? I heard you still can't even control your fire stars. Your fire awakening is going to be completely wasted. Bryan couldn't help but roll his eyes. Mr. Aoki really was relentless. Almost every class he brought up that lightning kid as an example. The so-called Stephen Smiths was the student who awakened the thunder element during the awakening ceremony. Ever since then, Mr. Aoki talked about him constantly. Even while lecturing, his face revealed undisguised pride. 4-star only? Bryan thought to himself with disdain. I've already controlled 6. Just one more step and I'll reach 7. Of course, Bryan didn't say any of that aloud. Instead, he simply walked leisurely back to his seat. All right, everyone, open your book of demons. Today, we will continue discussing common demons. As we all know, demons live outside the cities where humans reside. They are extremely hostile toward humans. They wander through the wilderness, hunting and killing constantly. So tell me, what should a magician do if they encounter a one-eyed wolf demon while traveling outside the city? Mr. Aoki began his lecture with great enthusiasm. The one-eyed wolf demon was a type of demon that lived in the wilderness near human settlements. Bryan had only seen it in books and videos before, but even from those images, the creature looked incredibly ferocious. Ordinary people had absolutely no chance of fighting such monsters. Only mages could stand against them. And for students like Bryan, who hadn't even mastered their first spell yet, the appearance of a single one-eyed wolf demon would result in nothing less than a bloody massacre. The one-eyed wolf demon was an important topic in demonology class. Mr. Aoki had already spent an entire week explaining it. Bryan was honestly getting tired of hearing about it. Right now, thanks to his dual element advantage, Bryan had already mastered 6 lightning stars. With intense concentration, he could make those 6 stars obediently line up into a star orbit. The problem was the 7th star. That stubborn little thing was unbelievably difficult to control, and it was driving Bryan crazy. Just one more step. Bryan, how's your fire element training going? Avery asked quietly as Bryan sat down. Same as always, Bryan replied casually. The fire element. Just as Mr. Aoki had said earlier, Bryan still couldn't control a single fire star. But that was unavoidable. This entire semester, Bryan had poured all of his energy into cultivating his lightning element. Really? Looks like your weak foundation is really affecting your progress. I heard Caleb can already control 4 ice stars. If he keeps practicing over winter break, he might even release the beginner spell, Icefine, next semester, Avery said with admiration. I know, Bryan replied calmly. Why aren't you worried at all? Caleb and Jack are already planning how to teach you a lesson. It's fine. Let them come. Bryan didn't care in the slightest. Right now, his entire mind was focused on controlling the 7th lightning star. Everything else was just noise. Avery sighed. Anyway, just be careful. This semester is almost over. Next semester, Bryan, you really need to work harder. If you fail the magic casting assessment at the end of next semester, the school advisor might find an excuse to expel you. The semester quickly came to an end, and Bryan could vaguely sense that the 7th star was finally beginning to respond to his persistence. Damn it, cultivating is even harder than chasing the love of your life. Day and night of greetings and sweet talk, Bryan complained as he walked out of the school gates. For the entire semester, Bryan had barely stepped outside the academy. Every single day followed the same routine. 2 hours of intense control practice, 10 hours of meditation, then classes, meals, and sleep. Day after day, without a single break. Now that the semester had ended, students received their winter break assignments and began heading home. As Bryan stepped outside the school gate, He instinctively thought about taking the bus home. But then, a strange feeling of emptiness struck him. He suddenly remembered something. His father had already sold the house, which meant he technically didn't have a home to return to anymore. His father, Bryce Lambert, was still working as a driver most of the time, barely ever at home. With nowhere else to go, Bryan decided he should visit his aunt, and more importantly, check on his little sister Bella. It had been almost half a year since he last saw her. He wondered how she had been living with his aunt. "I'll just pick her up from school." Bryan made his decision and boarded a bus heading toward another middle school. While sitting on the bus with nothing else to do, Bryan continued practicing his star control. He silently wondered if the seventh star would finally cooperate today. Different star spirits had completely different temperaments. Some were easy to coax. With a few nights of patient communication, Bryan could usually persuade them to obey. But others were extremely irritable. Those stars were incredibly difficult to deal with. If handled poorly, they could even cause a mental backlash, resulting in intense pain and draining several times more mental energy. Unfortunately, the seventh star Bryan was currently dealing with was exactly that type. Short-tempered, stubborn, and ready to fight at the slightest disagreement. It was like trying to reason with a spoiled child. Luckily, after nearly an entire month of effort, their relationship had begun to improve. The once irritable star spirit was finally showing signs of becoming a little more obedient. Otherwise, Bryan would have truly been in trouble. Spending almost a whole month on this seventh star. "Come on, line up!" Bryan calmed himself and focused with intense concentration, attempting once again to control all 7 stars at the same time. The first star was the most obedient. After months of daily nurturing, it immediately responded to Bryan's command. The lively star stopped moving and quietly hovered at the center of the stardust. The second star was slightly more stubborn, but it still reluctantly joined the first star in formation. Then came the third, the fourth, the fifth. The sixth star was surprisingly cooperative, happily sliding into position like an excited puppy joining the lineup. Now, only one star remained. Bryan concentrated every ounce of his mental power on the seventh star particle. The stubborn star had been racing wildly inside the stardust, but after sensing Bryan's continuous summons, it gradually slowed down. It still carried an air of impatience, even irritation, but slowly, reluctantly, the seventh star drifted into place. "Good boy, good boy!" Bryan's heart pounded with excitement. If the first 6 stars were obedient dogs that sat the moment they were called, then this seventh star was definitely a cat. A stubborn, arrogant cat that refused to listen to anyone. "Fine. If you insist I stay still, I suppose I'll humor you." Slowly, very slowly, the seventh star finally stopped moving, and in that instant, all 7 stars aligned. A breathtaking star trail formed inside the dazzling stardust. Purple lightning energy surged along the trail, using the first star as its starting point. A brilliant streak of purple energy shot through the other 6 stars like a blazing comet. Star trail complete! At the back of the bus, Bryan was suddenly surrounded by a curved arc of glowing purple stardust. Lightning energy flickered around him. An overwhelming surge of power flooded his body. "Thunderseal! It's Thunderseal!" Bryan was so excited he nearly burst out laughing. Zzz! Purple lightning wrapped around his right arm like a coiling python, crackling with dangerous energy. With a single motion, it could transform into a lightning strike and blast toward the center of the bus. My God! A magician! A lightning magician! Gasps erupted throughout the bus. An elderly woman holding groceries, an old man returning from exercise, a young girl glued to her phone. Everyone stared in shock at Bryan, who was sitting in the back of the bus. The terrifying lightning energy filled the bus with pressure. Everyone could feel the electric tension in the air. Several middle school students stared at Bryan with shining eyes. "Mommy, that big brother is amazing! Can I become that amazing when I grow up?" A small child tugged nervously at his mother's sleeve. The woman smiled and shook her head. Not everyone can become a magician, especially a lightning mage. Realizing his magic had caused too much attention, Bryan quickly stepped off the bus. But even standing on the roadside, his heart was still racing. Holy crap, that was insanely cool! Just thinking about the lightning coiling around his arm and the power to destroy someone with a simple wave, it felt unreal, like a dream. This is magic? No, this is magic! Bryan's heart pounded wildly. Even though he hadn't actually released the Thunder Seal yet, he could already feel the terrifying power of lightning flowing through his body. The respect from the passengers, the lightning crackling around his arm, it was an experience unlike anything he had ever felt before. Ha ha ha! I actually mastered Thunder Seal in just 1 semester. Now let's see who can stop me. Caleb Luna, Stephen Smiths. They'll all have to kneel before me. Normally, the school gave students an entire year to learn their first spell, but Bryan had done it in only 5 months. If people found out about this speed, the entire class, no, the entire school would be shocked. Not long ago, demonology teacher Mr. Aoki had been proudly praising another one of his students from classroom 7 who could control 4 stars. Caleb also only controlled 4 stars, but now, Bryan had already released Thunder Seal. Ha ha ha! Caleb, you fake noble brat, how can you compete with your father? Even just holding the Thunder Seal around his arm made him feel like lightning was about to explode out of his body. Just imagining the moment he fully released it was unbelievably exciting. Bryan took a deep breath. Calm down, calm down. I can't laugh like an idiot in the middle of the street. I'm a powerful mage now. Bryan actually wanted to cast Thunder Seal again immediately, but the moment he tried, a wave of dizziness hit him. His body suddenly felt empty. This must be the mental energy consumption the teacher talked about, Bryan muttered to himself. During practice, he could normally control stars for about 2 hours before feeling exhausted. But just now on the bus, he had only practiced for about 20 minutes, and the moment Thunder Seal formed, his mental energy had been drained instantly. Of course, Bryan understood why. When practicing control without forming a star trail, the energy cost was minimal. But once the star trail was completed and real magic flowed through his body, half his mana was gone immediately. Bryan had never been a mage before, but he had played plenty of games like League of Legends. Same principle, same mechanics. Magic was basically just mana management. Bryan is trying his best to not laugh like an idiot in the middle of the street and headed toward Plainfall Middle School. Plainfall Middle School was a private all-girls academy, famous throughout the entire city for having the most beautiful and fashionable girls. Unlike other schools, there was no dull magical theory here, nor a crowd of bookish magic students obsessed only with exams. Many of the girls attending the school came from families with magical backgrounds. Because of that, they often understood far more about magic than students who had gone through the standard 8 years of compulsory magical education. For example, magical accessories infused with spiritual power were commonly worn around their necks. Artifacts like these could nurture and strengthen one's spiritual energy. Compared to these second-generation mages, who were practically born with magical advantages, someone like Bryan had to climb upward step by step on his own. The streets around the school were filled with luxury cars. It was the busy hour after school. Bryan knew Bella's personality very well. She hated being compared to those wealthy girls who showed off their family's status through expensive cars. So, instead of leaving through the crowded main gate, she usually walked through a quiet alley nearby. That alley was lined with slender green bamboo planted beside the residents' windows. A faint fragrance from the bamboo leaves often drifted through the air. Bryan walked around the main gate and headed straight for that alley. Well, technically speaking, he was planning to ambush, wait for, his sister, Bella Lambert. There were very few people walking through the alley. Bryan stepped through a few courtyards and entered the familiar path. He hadn't seen his sister in a while. The world may have changed, but this city had barely changed at all. Even the slender bamboo, weathering the cold winter winds, still stood quietly beside the windows. Thinking about it, Bella probably hadn't changed much either. Bryan leaned casually against the wall in the middle of the alley. From time to time, he glanced toward the entrance of the alley. He planned to surprise Bella the moment she appeared. But, strangely, even after waiting a long time, her graceful figure still hadn't appeared. Why isn't she here yet? Bryan's body was starting to ache from standing there so long. He closed his eyes briefly. Out of pure habit, he almost entered meditative cultivation. Suddenly, he heard faint sounds coming from the direction of the alley leading toward the small hill nearby. Normally, the tall alley walls would block those sounds, but somehow they still reached his ears. Did my senses become sharper because of meditation? Curious, Bryan began walking toward the hill. As soon as he stepped out of the alley, the view suddenly opened up. About a kilometer away stood a small hill. At the foot of the hill was the location of his old house, the house his father had recently sold. Near the base of the hill was a small lawn arranged like a miniature park. Facing the wind stood a wooden swing, wrapped in dried winter vines. The swing hung completely still. A girl sat quietly upon it. Her long black hair flowed softly in the winter wind. She gazed quietly into the distance, like a lotus blooming in winter. Gentle, elegant, and quietly radiant, Bryan stopped walking. At some point, he had developed the habit of watching her from afar. Just seeing her sitting there peacefully filled his heart with warmth. Without realizing it, a smile slowly appeared on his face. But after a moment, Bryan sensed something was wrong. His expression immediately changed. His eyebrows tightened as he quickly walked toward the girl. The girl noticed him approaching. When she saw Bryan's face, she didn't look surprised at all. Instead, she simply smiled softly, as if she had already known he would come, as if she had been waiting for him. "Brother Bryan," she said sweetly. Bryan looked at her carefully. A hint of anger slowly appeared on his face. "Who did this?" Bella didn't respond. "Today, I'm going to teach them a lesson." "A bunch of trash!" Bryan's anger surged as he looked toward the stone steps leading up the hill. "There are too many of them. Let it go," Bella said softly, trying to calm him down. But Bryan shook his head. "No. This doesn't end here. I'm not letting those scum go." Without another word, he stormed toward the hill. Bella reached out, trying to stop him, but Bryan had already rushed up the steps in anger. Bella knew Bryan's temper very well. Ever since they were children, Bryan had always fought with local bullies because of her. He often fought several people at once, and always came back home covered in bruises. This was exactly the situation Bella feared the most. Because this time, the people bothering her weren't ordinary street thugs. They were part of a group known as the Green Bear Gang, a gang of school dropouts who specialized in bullying people for wealthy young masters and young ladies. There were at least 5 of them. 2 of them were much bigger and stronger than Bryan. If Bryan confronted them now, he would definitely come back with a swollen face and bruised eyes. "Hey Ben, don't you think this is a bit ungentlemanly?" A young man with a cigarette in his mouth said while shuffling a deck of cards. "What do you mean ungentlemanly?" The young man named Ben scoffed. "This is already the 16th time I've sincerely confessed to her. I asked her to be my girlfriend. I'm just sitting here in this pavilion playing cards while giving her time to think." "What's wrong with that?" Ben had a very noticeable blue tattoo on his neck. Because of his short jacket, the tattoo was clearly visible. It made him look like someone people shouldn't mess with. "Yeah," another young man wearing ripped jeans laughed. "If she rejects him, she can just walk away." "Royal flush!" "Ha ha, pay up, double the bet." "Damn, your luck is insane." "Let's keep playing," Ben said lazily. "We'll stay here until dark." "I don't believe that girl won't panic." He narrowed his eyes, enjoying the feeling of being a domineering boss. "When dealing with women, you have to be tough. Girls are naturally shy. If you're not firm, you won't get anywhere. Bella keeps getting prettier as she grows up. People said she is out of my level. Ben smirked arrogantly. Well, today, I'm taking that girl. Let's see who dares to say anything after that. Oh, right, the young man in denim suddenly said. I remember that girl has an older brother. He's pretty annoying, Ben offed dismissively. That trash? His combat power isn't even 5. Other than being stubborn, he's basically just a human punching bag. Beat him however you like. The man in ripped jeans cracked his knuckles. Yeah, I used to handle him alone. Now that I've built some muscle, I could crush him in 1 minute.